Welcome back, Whole Nine Yards here on a Monday afternoon here with Brandon Kokorian. We're just going to get straight into the J.J Watt signing that happened just today. J.J Watt decided to sign with the Cardinals. It was a surprising sign to me. I definitely wasn't expecting him to choose the Cardinals. I expected him to pick a bigger contender. It just seemed to me that he wanted to win a ring, and that was his only concern with everything left and with his career in the NFL. I expected him to maybe go to a Green Bay or maybe at Pittsburgh because his brother's there, even though they're not necessarily the biggest contenders in the world. But I was definitely expecting a bigger contender than the Cardinals, who were probably expected to go third in their division. I think at this point they're probably expected to be third, and they're not expected to win the division. So it was surprising to me. I mean, I don't know what you're.
Yeah, I mean, his contract was 2 years, $31 million, but 23 guaranteed. So it almost seemed like he was kind of going for the money more than the team, only because you had teams like, and I think I just heard Schefter talk about that the Packers, Browns, and Steelers were the main teams for him, but they were saying that the Packers really weren't that interested. The Browns wanted him, but they didn't want to pay that much, which makes sense. And then the Steelers really didn't have the money to do it. So I think it was probably between the Browns and I guess the Cardinals, who I hadn't even heard about the Cardinals before today. But, you know, it seemed like I would say he probably has a better chance to win with the Browns, not saying that that's that much better of a chance, but it's at least a better chance than the Cardinals right now. And so he picked the Cardinals. I would say, honestly, looking at the contract, I'd say is probably for money, only because I feel like the Browns could have offered a contract that was less, but you're probably in a better situation. So I would say probably went for money over team, which you wouldn't think, considering he's basically done everything that an NFL defensive end could do. He's won 3 Defensive Player of the Years. He's made a lot of money in his career, and he's on the decline. He's not done, but clearly based on the contract, but he's clearly on the decline. So you would think that he'd want that ring, especially being in Houston all those years. So it's definitely surprising to see him go to Arizona, where you're right, they probably are finishing third, may even finish last in their division based on if the Niners can rebound. So I was definitely surprised by the Cardinals.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I mean, I'm not sure if this is the case, but maybe it just came down to a matter of J.J. Watt felt disrespected by the amount of money the Browns were offering, or maybe the Packers were offering, or I'm not too sure, because, to me, the way he was setting it up the whole offseason, even the latter end of the regular season with the Texans, was he just wants a ring, and so I expected him to go to the Packers, but, I guess maybe, I don't know if it was a respect thing, if the Cardinals just wanted him the most, and he could sense that, and that's what he felt was the right move. But, what do you think it even changes the Cardinals team at all? To me, I don't think it really does. In terms of regular season wins, I don't think he's going to add more wins to their total, whatever it ends up being. It's going to be in that probably, I would have him in that 9-7 range, maybe 10-6, maybe 8-8 if they get unlucky, maybe 10-6 if they're lucky. I think J.J. Watt gives them the potential to win more than a playoff game. I'm not sure that it gives them the potential to go to the Super Bowl or anything, but I think when you have somebody like Watt, he can just take over a game at any time, really. Especially if they're not able to double team him. If he can be single teamed, and you never really know what's going to happen in the playoffs. You could get lucky and he could just take over a game, but he's definitely not what he was. He's not that dominant edge rusher who's going to be able to get 3 sacks in a game if you don't double team him. I don't think he's that anymore. I don't think you have to double team him necessarily. So
yeah, and last year he finished with 5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. So he's not, I think he played, like 15 games, maybe 16 games. But he's not the same guy he was. Now, for the Cardinals, they already have Chandler Jones, who was injured for most of last year. So, you're kind of getting him back. And, since 2012, Chandler Jones leads the league with 97 sacks, and then Watt has 95.5. Now, Watt's not that same guy he was, in 2015, 2012 to 2015, but, for the regular season, he's probably going to get you like 5-6 sacks, maybe a couple more because you have Chandler Jones on one side. But I think if they can get to the playoffs, I think that's where his value is going to be. He's able to make that play like a strip sack or a batted ball on third down or something like that. He's probably saving for that. He's more of like a playoff guy than a regular season guy. But it's an add to their defense, which wasn't great last year, even though their offense struggled at times. But they have pieces on their defense. It's more just bringing it together. And I know last year they played a 3-4. It'll be interesting to see if they switch to 4-3, because in a 4-3 you can have Jones on one side and Watt on the other. In a 3-4 it'd be Jones at the outside linebacker position, basically, kind of like Shaquille Barrett, where like you're rushing the passer, but sometimes you have to drop in coverage, and then Watt has to play inside. So I would think that they'd switch to 4-3 in order to get the two pass rushers, but I guess we'll have to see. I know Vance Joseph's their defensive coordinator, and he does do 3-4, so I would expect them to switch, but I guess we'll just have to see what they do.
I'm not sure. They might even decide. They might. I mean, it depends on what they think of Watt. But if they don't view Watt as a guy who you need to have in a 4-3 scheme, I don't think you have to make the switch. But yeah, not that Watt is the same player as JPP, but if you can get a similar type of thing that the Bucks got out of JPP this year, that with Watt, which is, yeah, I mean he's gonna play well in the regular season, but if you can get him to really channel his 2011 JPP, but 2015 Watt or whatever in the playoffs, I mean that's basically priceless. I mean that's the difference between you winning playoff games and not winning playoff games. So
yeah. So yeah, again, the contract was 2 years, $31 million, but it was 23 guaranteed. And yeah, he's going to the Cardinals, and we'll see if they make the playoffs. Like we said, it's going to be tough for them to make the playoffs, but if they do, they could definitely win a game depending on who they play. The NFC is definitely weaker than the AFC, but we'll just have to see if they even can make the playoffs first.
I still have the Niners and the Seahawks above them,
and the Rams,
and I still do have the Rams as well above them. The Seahawks are the most difficult, just because what we've seen with all the Russell Wilson stuff, like we talked about last episode. But assuming it's not all on fire throughout the regular season, on fire in a bad way, then I still think the Seahawks are a better team. I mean, Russell Wilson's just the better quarterback, and Pete Carroll's the better head coach. I think you could argue that overall the roster of the Cardinals is maybe slightly better, but yeah, I mean, I still have Wilson and Carroll far above Kingsbury and Murray at this point, so it's tough for me to want to pick the Cardinals to have a better record. But with that being said, I mean, is it unrealistic to say that all four teams from the NFC West could make the playoffs?
No, it's not. It's not totally unrealistic. The only way that wouldn't happen, I'd say, would be if what happens with the Saints. I mean, it seems like Drew Brees is coming back. Again, nothing's even been said, but he's been I've seen videos of him working out as if he's coming back. I don't feel like you'd be working out like that if you're not preparing to come back for the NFL. So I would say probably the Saints, but really other than that, if you look at the NFC North, there's no wildcard team that's in there. I'd say Lions, Vikings, Bears. I don't really see one of those being a wildcard team. NFC East, it's most likely not. And then it's really the South. I mean, you expect the Bucks to make the playoffs, and then you would probably think the Saints, but again, that depends on what happens with Breeze, if he's even good enough to even play, if he does play. So yeah, I think it's definitely possible that all four teams in the NFC West could make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, the main competitors will be the Vikings and the Saints, like you said, with Breeze. And then I think this is probably the last year the Vikings stick with Cousins/Zimmer, maybe both, maybe one or the other.
Yeah.
If they don't make the playoffs, I mean, I just don't see the point in bringing Cousins back, and I really don't see the point of bringing Zimmer back either. Even if you do make the playoffs, you'd still like to see them win the game. I mean, even though they didn't make the playoffs last year, there have been many years where they make the playoffs and they're just underwhelming. Even if you want to go back to the Keenum year where they made the NFC Championship, they did still get absolutely destroyed by the Eagles that year. And it was a fluke play it was a fluke that they even won that game to begin with. So. Yeah. And that's basically the furthest they've got in the Zimmer, not Cousins, but the Zimmer era. So, this is their last year to prove it. But it's definitely not unrealistic that all four teams from the NFC West could make the playoffs, and that would just go to show how absolutely insane that division is compared to any other division in the league.
Yeah, and I guess maybe another way that all four wouldn't be in is that they're all playing each other twice a year, so you just assume that one team would do bad against the rest, unless they all go 3-3. But you'd assume one team would go like 1-5, maybe even 0-6. Who knows? So you'd assume that one of those teams would probably go like 6-10, maybe 7-9. But again, even 7-9 could maybe get you a wild card spot. You know, it just if you just look at the other teams, again, the only team would be the Saints, maybe the Vikings. But you know, depending on what those two teams do. You know, it's definitely possible that all four teams could make it, even with the 7-9 record being a wild card team.
It's so difficult for one of these NFC West teams to make it to the Super Bowl or to honestly even have a 1 seed. I mean, just with how dominant this division is.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a team in the NFC East, you're laughing at the NFC West because it's so much easier for the Cowboys to go 11-5 than it would be for the 49ers or the Rams to go 11-5.
Mm-hmm.
So. It's for at least for my Super Bowl pick. It's gonna be so hard to pick a team from the NFC West.
Yeah, it almost narrows it down to rather the Bucs or the Packers, honestly. Unless one of those teams in the NFC West is just absolutely dominant, but even then, it's still tough. But it really does limit it to 2 teams, which would be the Bucs and the Packers in the NFC.
You're not gonna go with the Cowboys?
I mean, unless we go like 11-5 or 12-4, then no, I can't say I would. Yeah. But yeah, that was the football news for today. It broke just before we started. But we want to talk.
Actually, did you hear about the Washington football team? I mean, it's kind of old news, but how they
yeah
they're sticking with just the Washington football team for this year. But after this year, they're coming up with some name. I mean, do you have any? I mean, not that it really matters, but
I would have no guess as to what their name would be. Honestly. I feel like they should almost just stick with this. I don't know. I don't think it's that bad. It's not a name, but it's not. I think that's kind of unique. You don't have a name.
I don't hate that take. I wouldn't mind if they stick with Washington football team. I don't want them to come up with some cheesy like stupid animal name or whatever. It just there's just too many of them that it's like I wouldn't care at this point. And they'd have to do something that fits, unless they plan on changing the colors. I mean, they'd have to come up with something that fits the maroon and yellow colorway. So, I mean, I'm not sure what it would be, but yeah, I mean, that was just quick. But we can get into the logo stuff.
So we're going to talk about the NBA logo. So there's been news recently. Kyrie Irving talked about how the NBA logo should change and it should be Kobe instead of Jerry West, which, the NBA logo, it's supposed to be Jerry West, even though it's not, it's technically not official, but it is him. And he was saying it should be Kobe. Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first on what you think about that? And then if you think it should get changed, who do you think it should be? And if you don't think it should be changed, then why do you think it should be changed?
I wouldn't have a problem with the logo getting changed at all. I mean, to be honest, I don't really care about the logo. I mean, I just don't care. If people want to change it to Kobe, that's fine. If people don't want to change it to Kobe, I could not care less. Does it make sense why it's Jerry West? I mean, not really. If you just want to go strictly based off of statistics or whatever, I mean, Jerry West just isn't even close to the greatest player of all time. Does the greatest player of all time deserve to be the logo? I don't know. I just don't really care that much. I think it's something that somebody like Kyrie would care about just for some reason, rather than being focused on the season more. But I just don't really care too much. If people want to make it Kobe, that's fine. If I had my choice of who I would want it to be, again, I just don't really care that much. But I guess Kobe's fine because I think, and I heard this I think it was on First Things First. I think it was Broussard who was talking about it. He said that if Kobe were to be the logo, there's a reason that it's him, and there's you can't really disagree with it. Like, if you want to make it LeBron, you could say, why not Jordan? If you want to make it Jordan, why not LeBron? If you want to make it whoever, you could say, why not this person for this reason, and it'd be a valid argument. But if you made it Kobe, there really wouldn't be a counter argument against it. I mean, obviously he has the strengths in his career to be the logo, and obviously with the tragedy last year or whatever, there's just there's nothing else like it in the league, so it would make sense to me. But I mean, I just couldn't be. I just don't care enough to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care what the logo is, but I will say, and again, this is like kind of a risky path that we're talking about because, the way he died and everything like that. But if he hadn't died, would he even be saying this? Would Kyrie even be saying that Kobe should be a logo? Then that's the point. That if he didn't die, then we wouldn't even be having this conversation about it. Maybe about another player, maybe just changing in general, but about this specific player and Kobe, if he was still alive, we wouldn't have this conversation. So that's, unless Kyrie says that it's because of another reason, which I don't think he said yet, and I don't know if he even said that was the reason as to why, but it's clearly the reason because you just wouldn't be saying it if it wasn't. So I don't have a problem with it changing, but I think it should change for something that isn't just because of a sudden death or something like a tragic event. I think it should change because people agree upon it and the player that they choose is worthy of that, which there's only a handful, which I don't think you can pick Jordan because he has his own brand, which I just don't think it works. Like, you can't use the same logo, you know what I mean? Like, for the Jordan brand, then for the NBA logo. Could you do LeBron? I think you'd probably have to wait till he's done playing. I don't think you could do that while he's playing. That would just be weird. Should, like, Kareem be it with the sky hook? It has to be something. It has to be like a move or a shot because, that's just what the logo is. It can't just be, I guess it could be someone dribbling like it is with Jerry West, but you just assume that they're going to change it. It'd be something that people recognize, you know what I mean? So, I don't know. I mean, if Kobe didn't die and they wanted to change it to Kobe, then I wouldn't have a problem with it. But just because of that reason, and that's clearly the reason, I have somewhat of a problem with it.
Well, I just don't know, why.
Because if he didn't, the reason that they're changing it, or they want to change it at least, is because, even the NBA, I don't think the NBA wants to change it, but the players want to change it because that he died. And I just don't think that's a valid enough reason to do it just because of that. That's all.
That makes sense. I think if you're gonna make the logo Kobe because he died, that's fine. I would rather you do that than. I don't know what.
They have the All-Star Game MVP after him. They changed that also.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess you could stick with that. I wish I cared about the logo. I just don't. If you were to make Kobe the logo, I guess it would be him shooting the ball. I guess it'd be his fadeaway.
Yeah, I guess so.
But I definitely would think that there's more iconic, shots, like the skyhook or, not that Nowitzki would be the logo, but the Nowitzki fadeaway. You'd have something like that be the logo, not. I don't know. I guess would you be able to tell it's Kobe? I feel like it'd be similar to the Jerry West thing where it's like, it just. First, it looks like somebody playing basketball, and then second, it looks like Kobe.
Yeah, and I think if you didn't really know basketball and you just looked at the logo, you just think it's someone dribbling. You wouldn't think anything of it. And I think the only reason people really know is because I don't even think anyone knew it was Jerry West until I think he said it, or maybe the NBA said it, but it was years later. It's not even they made it and everyone knew it was him. So I don't know. It's definitely something it's a topic of conversation, which has kind of been conversation for the last couple years, but with what happened last year with Kobe and then, Kyrie just saying it now, it puts the NBA in a tough spot because it seems like most players would probably agree that they would change it, whether they agree it's Kobe or just someone else. And, if the NBA says no, then it's kind of looking like, well, you don't want to change it for Kobe or, you don't want to change it because of that. That's kind of I think people would look down upon that, but if they say yes, then people are going to be like, oh, you only changed it because you got pressured into doing it. So I think they're in a tough spot, and I don't know if they've come out even with an answer yet. It's probably no. I don't think they just change it because Kyrie Irving says to change it, but will it change in the future? Maybe. I don't know. I think Jerry West has said that he's okay with changing it, but I don't think he's not going to have say whether they actually do or not. So I'm not really sure what they should do.
If you're Adam Silver, are you changing it or are you sticking with West for now?
I think you're sticking with West for now. I don't think you can let players and media, sway your decision into changing it or not changing it. So I think you keep it, and if it comes down the line that you do want to change it, I think you should have a thorough not like investigation, but thorough like process where you come up with someone who should be the logo. And if that does turn out to be Kobe, then it turns out to be Kobe. But if I don't think you should change it without going through a process and going through, it's probably like 5 to 10 players that you could actually change it to. And
I mean, like to me, it's Jordan. I'll throw Kobe in there. LeBron,
Russell, Bill Russell.
I mean, like, what's the point?
I mean, yeah. I mean, like, what would his logo be? Like, what would his move or whatever
almost have
be?
To be him like holding up rings because that's literally his only accomplishment, which is not a bad thing. I'm just.
But he also has the Finals MVP after him. A lot of these guys do have stuff after them. Not saying that should say that they shouldn't be the logo, but like a lot of these guys do have awards after them.
To me, other than the fact that you have to, or ideally in an ideal world, you'd want to have it after somebody that has an iconic shot or dribble or whatever, it would be tough to not go with Jordan, LeBron once he's retired, or Kobe to me, just because those are the 3 most iconic / best players of the last, of all time. Because if you do go with, whoever, literally anybody that's ever played basketball ever, my argument would be, but LeBron is better, but Jordan is better. And, like, why not go with them if they're just objectively just better basketball players? If you wanted to go with Magic or Bird, I would just be like, but why? Jordan is just objectively better. LeBron's objectively better.
Yeah. But I think LeBron, for right now, LeBron, you can't do it now. You have to wait till he retires. But again, what would LeBron's even be? Would it I don't even know what his thing would be. It's not like his jump shot, he doesn't have a signature jump shot. His, it's not like a dunk he has or something like that.
You could do the dunk from the Wade alley-oop to LeBron dunk.
Yeah.
You could do that. Now, it'd be similar to the point. It'd be similar to the Jerry West thing where it's like you can tell it's him when you compare it to the picture that they used, but it doesn't look like West. There's an argument to be made that that's actually a good thing, just because, do you want your logo to be clear that do you want it to be something like the Jordan logo or like a Kareem skyhook, or do you want it to be something more subtle, like
that kind of represents everyone?
That represents everybody.
Yeah.
And I not that LeBron's dunk necessarily represents everybody, but it represents. I guess everybody in the NBA can dunk, except literally everybody. So,
I think that's also kind of a reason just to keep it as it is, though, because again, it's Jerry West, but it's just someone dribbling a basketball. It's not a signature shot, a signature dunk, signature move that someone has. So it's not specific to one type of it's not specific to one person. It's specific to the whole league as a whole, even though you do know that it is one person that, they did the silhouette of.
Yeah. To me, I would not care if they changed it or didn't change it. Ideally, I would just like to not have to talk about it ever again, just because I can't really be bothered. But, yeah.
Yeah, so, it was just something that's come up recently, and I guess one quick thing about it was that he was saying that it should be a black player not instead of a white player, but just because clearly the league is more black than white. It's not a question, and the greater players have been more black than white. So, that's also, I guess that's technically another reason as to why Kobe would fit that. LeBron would fit that, MJ would fit that, Kareem, Bill Russell, a lot of people would fit that. So,
I think the only white person you would want to make it would be Bird, right? You wouldn't make it any, like, if you, not that you would make it Bird, but the only person,
like, on stats, greatness, everything like that.
The only person in contention that isn't black is Larry Bird.
Yeah. So, and you could say Dirk, but he's not that.
No,
he's not that like Bird match. He's not like that. So
I'm not saying I would make it Bird. I was just saying that.
He's like the only guy who's not black. But I guess we'll see what happens. My guess is that they don't change it. They just keep it, and my guess is they probably keep it. I wouldn't say forever, but I think they'll keep it for a long time until maybe something happens.
Yeah, I just don't see a point in changing it. I think it's a fine logo. I I don't mind the Jerry West logo at all. I think it looks fine. I just don't see the point in changing it. If they want to change it to Kobe or whatever, I definitely wouldn't have a problem with it. I'd be completely all right with it. I'd be excited to see what it looks like. But again, I mean, I just don't care too much about it. But I'll get into something. This is something that I think the NFL needs to be worried about, and it's similar to. When I thought about it, the first thing I thought about was the NBA, and it was basically just these quarterbacks. I mean, they've seemed to have because of Brady, they've gotten a lot more control of the organizations, or at least they want more control. I mean, the first thing that started was Watson, basically just deciding he wants out, and I think many would understand why. And then you look at Wilson, who is now basically wanting out, or at least wanting to have more control, basically be a co-GM of the team. And I think a big part of why he's doing this is, again, you look at Brady across, in the same conference as you, and he goes to the Bucs for one season, he gets what he wants, and all of a sudden he's winning a Super Bowl. I think you see quarterbacks, and if I was a quarterback, I'd want what Brady has too. I think the NFL needs to be worried about quarterbacks becoming what the NBA is, with mobility, being way too powerful, demanding trades. And I know some will say that mobility in players across the league, is good and exciting, and I think that's fair to a certain extent. I just am worried that we're going to get to the point where it's like every year we have 2 top 5 quarterbacks that have had bad years or are in bad situations, just don't want to play for their teams and demand trades. And to me, it's cool at times, but it's just too much mobility for me. And I'd like to see quarterbacks stay where they're drafted, at least for the most part. I just don't want to see Russell Wilson get traded. It's a breath of fresh air that Giannis gets to stay in Milwaukee, because literally, like, almost every other star has, they'll be drafted in a place and eventually they'll end up wanting out. I mean, like an AD or like a LeBron or like a KD, all these players, they want to move. And I just don't want the NFL to get to that place where it's like Burrow, Herbert, Lawrence, whatever, and other quarterbacks that end up being good in the next few years. I don't want all of them to get to the point where, maybe Cincinnati does get to the point where it's completely inept and Burrow does need to leave, but I don't want it to be something where it's like, wow, it's been a bad 2 years. I'm just out. I'm done. I think the NBA has way too much player mobility in it. I think the players have a little bit too much power, and not that it's necessarily a bad thing, but I do kind of like where the NFL is at in player mobility compared to the NBA, and I don't want the NFL to get to that point, because I think it doesn't make the league worse off, but there's something about not having, 3 of your top 10 players go to different places every offseason. And yeah, that's my...
Yeah, and I've been thinking about this also, and I've seen a lot of stuff about it, and I agree. I think that in the NBA it's way easier to move, because the players in the NBA have way more control than the owners. It's not even close. It is in the NBA, one guy can make a difference on your team. Like if LeBron goes to any team, that team's a finals contender. Really, no matter what team it is. Now maybe certain teams, but you know what I'm saying. Like basically every single team becomes a finals contender. In the NFL, you can't really do that. I know it happened with Brady, but that team had a good roster, and you add a quarterback like that, they're going to be a lot better. But that team was a good roster. They weren't 2-14 the year before, but in the NFL, owners have control. They're always going to have control. No player is above an owner or the owners as a whole. Even Brady, you could say what you want, but he's not above the owners no matter what happens. And he's really a specific case. There's probably no one else who's going to be like Brady where they can just dictate that. But
I think we can get to the point of that, though. If Watson forces his way out, which it looks like he's going to, and I think it needs to be more than just Watson, but if Watson does it, then Wilson does it. Then the next year after this, take your pick. Then Prescott does it after signing an extension. For some reason, they go 4-12 or something. Take your pick of quarterback that does it. If it keeps happening over and over again, I think you can get to the point where, yes, these quarterbacks will end up having more power than they probably should, and it just makes the league a little bit less exciting because if you're not an LA team, if you're not a team that's competing right now, ready to win a Super Bowl, you have to just tank and then hope you can get a quarterback that way because, quarterbacks are never going to want to go to you, or there's no way to trade for a quarterback because all these quarterbacks are like, I just won't play for this team. Basically what happens in the NBA where it's like Harden. I'll play for the Sixers, I'll play for the Nets, and that's it. And that's basically it. And there's just, where he's going. He can force his way out to anywhere he wants to be. And to me, that's just a little bit makes it just less exciting. It's just not exciting to me to watch, Harden, Kyrie, and KD all get to the same team in the matter of seconds. And yeah.
Yeah, that's a situation that can happen in the NBA because if a player wants out or a player wants something in the NBA and the team doesn't allow that, then, in the NBA, you can just text someone and be like, and let them know about the situation or they know about the situation, and then they're not going to want to go there. Then that agent who represents that player, he's going to tell his players not to go there. So I think it's different in the NBA in that if a situation goes bad and it's the player wanting out or the player wants something and the ownership isn't allowing him to have a say or do anything, then that would be really bad for the NBA because it spreads around the league very fast, and then people aren't going to want to go there. Relationships would have to be cut. You have to get new front office, everything new, basically, if you really want star players to come, because that's really what it is in the NBA. It's about star players. While in the NFL, if that situation were to happen, people would still come to your team. If you pay them, they'll still come. If for the Texans, if they wanted to pay for a star player, whoever it was, they'd probably say yes to that if the money was there and everything was right. It really wouldn't matter what the situation really was with Deshaun Watson. A star player would still want to come. So I think it's good. I think the NFL is safe in that it won't affect it that way, but I think for quarterbacks, which again is the most important position in sports, there's going to be certain situations probably every 2-3 years where maybe even every single year, who knows, where a quarterback is going to want out. He's going to want more say, which he's never going to get. No quarterback's going to get enough say unless they win multiple Super Bowls with that organization. And that's going to be a problem. I don't think it'll be as bad as the NBA, but it's definitely going to be a problem. Definitely for quarterbacks. For other players, if you're like a cornerback or a safety and you say something, they'll just trade you. It doesn't matter.
It's only the quarterback position that's possible. And people thought this about the Patriots, which is the Patriots can get players to come to them for a lesser price, kind of like, how people will go to LeBron for way cheaper than a different team. We basically saw that just wasn't true, and that it was way more so that people would rather play for cheaper with Brady than it was with the Patriots. All of the signings the Patriots did last offseason without Brady, there was nobody, clamoring to play with Belichick for a cheaper price than what they're worth on the market. So yeah, like you said, if a team has the most money, then they're willing to offer the most money for X player. 9 times out of 10, assuming it's not a star quarterback, or I guess a quarterback in general, they're gonna sign there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wouldn't want to get to the point where every year this type of stuff happens. It just to the point it's gonna get dry for me. And Watson and Wilson situations aren't necessarily boring to me, but if it happens every year and next season it happens with Matt Ryan, I don't want to get to the point where it's every single quarterback is doing this, and I would just get fed up and to the point where it's like, all right, this is the NBA, and I don't like that at all. So
the only thing for the Watson situation is that, and I think this is for most people, is that he signed that contract extension knowing what was happening, that they didn't have Hopkins at that point. Bill O'Brien was still the coach and GM, so he knew all of this stuff that was happening, and he still signed the contract. So I think people look at that and kind of say, you're in a bad situation, and you definitely were left out to dry, but you also signed up for it knowing what possibly could happen, or at least the situation that you were in September or whenever he signed it, was either August or September. So I think people look at that a little differently. And for Wilson, I think his is more kind of like he doesn't. I know he said he doesn't want to get hit which has been a problem his whole career, is that he can't move. He could still move, but he can't move like he did in like 2012, 2013, when like literally every single play he was just running around, and then after 10 seconds he'd throw the ball, or he'd just run it, and a play would, like a 10-yard gain, 15-yard gain would happen. He can't really do that exactly anymore. Like you said, he's 33 years old, and he also wants more say in the organization, which, could he get a little bit more? Would it actually be real say? Like, would they may listen to him, but they would never, most likely not just like actually do what he says. So I don't know. I think that situation's maybe a little different. Whatever the next quarterback situation like this is going to be, if it actually is a real problem in the organization, then at least it's a little more understandable as to why they may want to get out. But if it's a normal situation and they just want out, then I mean that's that can't be happening. That's a problem.
If Wilson wants the same amount of power that Brady has, I guess it's up to you to decide how much power he has. I guess mine would be he has the power to bring in a couple players, whoever he wants, and he's like a co-GM. If Wilson wants that type of power and you're the Seahawks, I mean, what do? I mean, do you ship him out? What's the play?
Well, so you're saying like have suggestions on bringing people in, or actually bringing people in? Because I think.
I mean, what do you think, Brady? Do you think Brady has the ability to suggest, or do you think he has the ability to outright just bring somebody in?
I think he has the ability to bring someone in, because the Antonio Brown situation, Arians didn't want him, and Brady brought him in, and it did work out. But if that was any other quarterback, Antonio Brown wasn't going on that team, no matter what the relationship was between Brown and whatever the quarterback was. So I would say for Wilson, I'd give him the power to suggest stuff and like talk to us frequently about stuff, and if you want to follow up on that, then you can, but at least give him the chance to say something to the front office and you at least listen. I think that's what star quarterbacks should at least be the limit, like the lowest possible thing for that star quarterback should be at least to suggest stuff and be heard by the front office. I think that's reasonable for a star quarterback. For like normal quarterbacks, they don't really have say, and then like the Brady, the Mahomes, they have the ability to bring someone in if they want to.
So you wouldn't put Russell in that? You wouldn't put Wilson in that?
Well, I think he's tried to do that, and I just don't. I think if he was playing at this level when he was 27 instead of being 33, I think probably. But he's 33, and I just, I know he may be able to play another 5, 6, 7 years, but I just think that if he was like Mahomes' age, or he done what Brady has done, then he would have that power. But I just don't think he does.
Would you give him that power if you're the GM, or would you
Well, I think at this point, I don't think you can. I mean, maybe.
So what would you say? Would you trade him, or would you just be like? I mean, I would probably just. I would just say tough luck. I mean, you just gotta. You can either play or you're not. I mean, you're under contract. We're not gonna budge. We're not gonna go get X player just because you want them. We're gonna do what's best for the team for the next. Yes, we're going to do what's best for the team this year, but we're also thinking about 3-4 years down the line. You're just going to have to bear with it. And
yeah, and for Wilson, I mean, he like when speaking about Wilson, unless they get a perfect trade package, which we were kind of talking about, like if they get Dak and 3 first-round picks, then maybe you trade him. But Wilson's not going to be like Watson, where he's just going to want to sit out for the whole year. He's not going to do that, where it seems like Watson is definitely willing to do that. And I know he did talk to their head coach, this talking about Watson, and he basically told him, I'm not playing for you. I think he like actually said that to him. I don't think Wilson would do that, because I think he has a good reputation in the NFL and across, like the media and just people in general. So I don't think he wants to like ruin that by just like holding out and being an absolute, there's just being like a problem in the locker room. I don't think he wants to do that. So I think if you were to tell him we're not going to trade you and you're going to have to play, I think he would. Now, would he be happy? Most likely not. But I think he's willing to not sit out and actually to play if you weren't to trade him. But as we saw by the list of teams that he gave out, he's clearly looking to get traded. You don't just come out with the list of teams if you're not looking to get traded.
Yeah. I mean, I would just go to him and be like, I mean, yeah, we hear you on certain things. We're willing to listen to you. But as far as giving you more power than that, we can't just have you decide who to bring in and who to not. You're a great player. You're a top quarterback in the league. We wouldn't trade you for anything. But I mean, we're thinking about the team for this year, but also 3-4 years down the line, and who knows, what happens then. And yeah, I mean, I would say something like that, and maybe understand. I'd assume he understands. I would not give him the power where he can bring in players, because, like we've seen with like LeBron, or like we're going to probably see with Brady, is just, if you give somebody the power to do that, you're going all in on probably 1 or 2 years. And if you don't win a Super Bowl, you're going to regret it, because your team is going to be pretty bad for a long time. And I think the Bucks will probably end up being in that type of case where they're going to have a lot of bad contracts. If they do sign a Barrett and a Godwin, and who knows what else happens. I think 2 years down the line, I think they're still going to be a talented team, and who knows what they're doing at quarterback after Brady. But I think they're going to have a lot of bad contracts, and we're going to see just like LeBron, which is when that player who basically was a co-GM of that team leaves, it's gonna fall really. It's gonna turn really bad, because all those moves that those players made were based off of the time that they were going to spend with the team, and nothing further than that. Which, I mean, we clearly saw with the early Cavs. Not necessarily as much the early Cavs, but definitely the Heat, definitely the second iteration of LeBron on the Cavs, and definitely I think we'll see it as well in the Lakers once LeBron retires there as well.
Yeah, and I think in the NFL, it's probably in any sport, it's definitely worth it. Like if you were to say you have 3 years to go like all in and you win one championship, that's definitely worth it. But you're right, when that GM leaves, when those players leave and you have those contracts, and for football and basketball, it's not like you have farm systems or anything like that, but like for baseball, it would matter. Once those GMs leave and that quarterback leaves, that star player retires or leaves or whatever, then yeah, you're gonna have. It's kind of like what the Royals did. Now I know they didn't go like all in that they got all these free agents and everything, but they had a lot of players in 2014 and 2015 who weren't making a lot of money. They were all really good players. And they made additions to help that team. They got to the World Series, they lost, and then they got to the World Series again and won. And for the last, 5 years, they've been a bottom team in the MLB. So that can happen, and it's definitely worth it when you win, but you have to guarantee that you'll win. It's like the Nets. If they don't win with this team, I mean, none of them are going to re-sign, and if any of them do, it's one of them, and that's not enough to win a championship. Even if it's KD, I wouldn't assume, especially with him, he'd be like, in his mid-30s, he just wouldn't be the same player. But if they don't win a championship, then it's not worth it, and you could look at that and say that was a complete failure. But if they win one, and no matter what happens in the future, then you could always look back on that and say it was a success no matter what. So for the NFL, I mean, I don't love giving power to the quarterbacks, and I don't think that you should unless you're like a Brady or Mahomes type. But if it works out and you win a championship, then you can't fault for doing that, even if you're going to be bad for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I don't even think the Seahawks are necessarily in that spot with Wilson specifically, but yeah, I mean, I would definitely be willing to go all out. And the Seahawks have shown they're willing to go all out to try to win. I just think it's definitely the offensive line and not being hurt on that situation that has angered Wilson so much. I mean, you trade 2 first-round picks for Jamal Adams, but I mean, I think Russell Wilson has taken the most sacks out of any quarterback since, I want to say 20, whatever it is. I don't remember the stat, but I mean, Russell Wilson has taken so many sacks.
It's probably since he came into the league.
I think it's since 2011.
Yeah. And the one thing that really messed them up, I forget how long ago this was, but it was when they traded for Jimmy Graham and they traded Max Unger, their center. Yeah. They had a good offensive line. This was probably 2015, maybe 2016. They had a pretty good offensive line, and he wasn't the quarterback he was now, but he was progressing towards being like an actual top 5 quarterback, top 3 quarterback. And then they traded their starting center for Jimmy Graham, which didn't work out. He wasn't the same player with the Seahawks as he was with the Saints, and then their offensive line fell apart. So, maybe he's still mad about that, in that they did have a good offensive line, and they kind of threw it away.
About that trade specifically, I mean, I just think it was a trade that ended up not working out. But I mean, at the time, I think a lot of people did like the trade from the Seahawks perspective. I mean, obviously, because Jimmy Graham was such a flashy name at the time, and only having to give up. I think you did give up a pick as well with that. I forget. I don't think it wasn't a first. Might have been a second or something.
I'll look it up right now, but
I mean, yeah, I don't think it's that trade specifically that Russell Wilson might get mad about. I just think it's, I mean, not drafting good offensive linemen, not willing to maybe instead of trading 2 first-round picks for Jamal Adams, you use one of those picks on a lineman, and then you use one of those picks on somebody you hope can develop into somebody like Jamal Adams, rather than, again, trading 2 first-round picks and not using one of those on a lineman. I just think, that's where my frustration would be, rather than trading a center 6 years prior for a tight end who has potential to be the second best tight end in the league next to Gronk. I mean, I wouldn't get mad at that. But
Yeah, and I mean the trade was Max Unger and a first-round pick for Jimmy Graham and a fourth-round pick. So you did give up a first-round pick in that, and clearly the trade didn't work out. And even looking at the Jamal Adams trade, I mean, to trade for a safety like that, safety is not the most valuable position in the league. If it's a cornerback, defensive end, then yeah. But first for a safety, for two first-round picks, when you saw Jalen Ramsey, a cornerback, get traded for 2 first-round picks, I see what they're trying to do, and that you try to get star players. But sometimes you have to look at the position, what you're giving up or what you're receiving, and say, is this position worth it for giving up these picks? Or is this position, even if the trade is worth it, is that position and that player even going to make that much of a difference on our team? So, I don't fault them for trying to go for it and trying to make moves, but maybe just make smarter moves. And maybe that's what Wilson wants. Maybe he thinks that his say could lead to smarter moves, but it may be even too late for that. He's 33. And they don't really have that much draft capital to trade anyways, so this may just be the team for the next couple of years if he's even still on the Seahawks.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you one thing that Wilson definitely wouldn't be doing if he were to get more power, and that is, Wilson definitely wouldn't be like, hey guys, we got to think about the future. We got to think about 4 years down the line.
Yeah.
Like, he wouldn't be doing that, whereas somebody in the Seahawks organization probably would be thinking about, 4 years down the line. So, I mean, that's the biggest problem with giving a quarterback this power is just, for a fact they just don't care about anything other than, like, probably the current year and the year after that at most.
Yeah, and that's the problem with front offices, that they have to make a decision. Like, do they want to try and stretch out the prime or the window that they have and see if they can, be really good here and maybe have one down year but then be back to being really good, or they want to go all in for 2 or 3 years? It's a decision that front offices have to make. And if you have a star quarterback like that, you'd want to make it last as long as you can because you have that guy. But then if stuff doesn't start to work out, then you may just have to go all in, which will ruin your future. But again, if you win the championship, it's all worth it. So, it's a tough spot that front offices and GMs are in, because if they mess up, then they're fired and then a new guy comes in. So, it's not the players who are going to get fired. It's going to be the GM and the head coach.
Yeah. But I think that's everything for today. Appreciate everybody who stayed to the end. We'll be back Friday at noon.